Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to expose a couple of variables to Blueprint. Now, here's what I mean. If I open my BP item blueprint, I notice that in the details panel, we have lots of different variables. These are inherited by the actor class. Now, we can add to our details panel some of the variables from our C++ class that we've defined. So let's hop back into item.h. Now, I'm done with /.h. I'm going to close that tab, and I'm done with debug macros for now, so I'll close that tab. And I'd like to expose some properties to Blueprint. I'm mainly interested in my amplitude and my time constant. Now, exposing these to Blueprint has several benefits. For one, if we take a look at our details panel and we're able to, say, change the amplitude or that time constant, then we don't have to go back into C++ and change it here and then go through the trouble of compiling. That's one benefit. Another is I'd like to be able to select one of our actors in the world and change properties on this individual instance without affecting the blueprint itself. So we have a blueprint that we can change in the blueprint editor, and we also have instances of this blueprint class in the world. So there's a difference between an instance in the world and this default blueprint here. We're going to learn how to expose properties to the details panel in the blueprint editor itself, and also how to expose properties to an individual instance, as we have a details panel here in the level editor showing us properties we can change when we have that instance selected in the world. So back here in item.h, let's expose a couple of variables. First, I'm going to expose amplitude to Blueprint, which means I need to give amplitude a uProperty macro. What this does is exposes amplitude to the reflection system, and this allows it to participate in the reflection system, which has the capability of exposing this float variable to Blueprint. Now, to expose amplitude to Blueprint, I have to provide a specifier in the parentheses of the uProperty macro. Now, there are several different types of uProperty specifiers, and each of them determines how our variable gets exposed. Now, the first uProperty specifier I'm going to introduce to you is edit defaults only. Now, be careful, we have to spell this exactly correct, and it is case sensitive, so we can't make any mistakes here. Now, let's see what edit defaults only does for us. I'm going to go ahead and save and head back into the editor and hot reload. Now that we've compiled, let's go back into BP item and select BP item self. Now there's something new here. Up here at the top, under the item category, we see amplitude. It's exposed and we can edit it. This is very convenient. So if I press play, I see my objects oscillating or going up and down at a given amplitude. But now that I can change the amplitude here in the blueprint, I can make tweaks and changes very quickly. For example, I can change this to 0.75. And now when I press play, we're oscillating even more. And if I change this to, say, 5, now we're going much higher and lower. So already we're seeing the benefit of exposing this property to Blueprint. I'm going to set it back to 0.25. Now there is a limitation of edit defaults only. We can only see and edit this property from the default blueprint. If I go back into the world and select a BP item, there is no amplitude in the details panel. I can search for amplitude and nothing comes up. So that's what edit defaults only does. We can edit it, but only in the default blueprint. Let's go back into Visual Studio. And this time, let's expose the time constant variable. What I'm going to add is a uProperty macro with the macro specifier edit instance only. Now, you could probably guess what this is going to do for us. Let's go back into the editor and we'll hot reload. Okay, so we've hot reloaded. And now take a look at this. I have this BP item selected, and on this instance in the details panel, under item I see time constant here, and I can change it. I can set this to say 1, and if I press play, take a look at what's happening here. The BP item to the right is oscillating or going up and down much slower than the item to the left. That's because I changed the time constant on this particular instance of BP item. The one to the left is still using that default value. So that's what edit instance only does for us. It exposes that property and we can change it on the instance. But if I go back to BP item and click on BP item self, I can only see amplitude. That's because amplitude has edit defaults only, whereas time constant has edit instance only. So now we're seeing the difference between the default blueprint and an instance based on that blueprint in the world. Now, what if we'd like to be able to see the property and edit it both in the default blueprint and in the details panel for an instance in the world? There's a uProperty specifier for that too. If we come back into Visual Studio and we replace edit defaults only with edit anywhere, let's see how this works. I'll go ahead and replace edit instance only for time constant, also with edit anywhere. Let's go ahead and save and hop back into the editor. Now with a quick hot reload, now let's take a look. Now we see in the details panel for this instance, we have both amplitude and time constant, and we can edit either one. And if we go back into the default blueprint, we have amplitude and time constant. So these are editable both on the default and on an instance in the world. This is the best of both worlds, and it gives us the most flexibility. It's also the least restrictive, so if you want to keep control of a variable only on the default blueprint and not be able to change it on an instance in the world, you'd use edit defaults only. But if you'd like to be able to change it on an instance but not in the default blueprint, you would use edit instance only. And to be able to change it on the default and on the instance, we use edit anywhere, which is more common. So this is great. I can change each one individually. Now, if I go back to the default and I change the default value, let's say I take my amplitude and change it to 0.5 and compile, well, if I go back into the editor, the amplitude for the BP item to the right stays at 0.3524. And that's because I've already changed it. And if you've changed it, you're overwriting the default value. However, if I select the BP item to the left, it now has the new value of 0.5. That's because I've never touched it on this instance. If we change it in the default blueprint, say to 0.75 and compile, then coming back onto the instance, we see 0.75. It changes along with the default. But the second I change it here on the instance, say I change it to 0.1, then if I come back and change this again on the default, say to 0.5 and compile, then coming back into the details panel on the instance, that change did not take place. And that's because we have manually overwritten its value here on the instance. Now, properties in the details panel can be reset to their defaults with this curved arrow. If I click that, it goes back to 0.5. So we can always reset these values to their defaults using that curved arrow icon. So now we have flexibility because we've exposed our variables to Blueprint, and now we can change them individually or in the default Blueprint itself because we gave these properties edit anywhere in C++. So now we know how to expose these properties to Blueprint. Excellent job. I'll see you soon.